All right. All right. So, welcome everyone. Nick Wagner Sr. It's Sunday night at 8 o'clock Eastern, which means I am live for another episode of the Full Potential Podcast. A little bit different this week. So, I'm actually going to be the one interviewed. So, Leah Calabria is joining me, who has been doing some of the mini inspiration podcast episodes that we have started releasing. They're micro size 5 to 7 minute podcast episodes about different topics that might help you with your career instead of interviewing a guest. And Leah was kind enough to ask me to actually go live with her, and she's going to be the guest interviewer today and interviewing me about my new book, 10 Secrets to Success After Graduation. So, Leah, thank you so much for doing this. I will say I'm slightly nervous being in the hot seat with you, having to answer all these questions, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm excited to talk about my new book. So I will hand it over to you.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I appreciate you letting me co-host with you and getting all the details and nitty gritty about your book, which I'm a huge fan of. So I think first, how does it feel to have written a book? You have a book with your name on it that's going to be sitting in a bookstore. Like, how does that feel?
Yeah. I'll give you a quick update. It feels good. I think I told you when I sent you the I guess the pre-read to prepare for this interview. I was a little nervous, and I sent it to a few other people as well as part of like my pre-read people. It was nerve wracking. I started the project in summer of 2019, so pre-COVID,
Mm-hmm.
and with the idea of I told my wife I think I want to write a book to help people with their careers. So it all went along with everything I'm doing with Full Potential and inspiring people with their careers. And I never really considered, I would say, myself to be a great writer. And I say that in the book. I like talking like this. I'm not a huge writer, and I don't even necessarily read a lot of books. I actually listen to more books than I probably read.
Mm-hmm.
So my wife kind of chuckled when I told her that. My wife is like a voracious reader. She literally reads. I mean, I can't even tell you. I'm going to guess it's probably at least a couple books a month. So when I told her this, I don't know if she really thought I thought it through, because writing a book is obviously a lot of work. So it started summer of 2019 where I kind of started getting my thoughts down on what did I actually want to do and what did I want it to look like. And I knew I wanted it to be I wanted to be bite sized, so you don't have to read the whole thing at once. I knew I wanted it to be interactive, so there's activities in it. And the other really important thing, Leah, is I knew I didn't want to do it myself, and
Mm-hmm.
and not because I don't consider myself a really strong writer, but more because I wanted that diversity of thought and experiences to share in the book. So that's kind of where it started. Right now we're waiting for. I'm working with Megan Hayden, who's the owner of Riverbend Bookshop in Glastonbury, Connecticut, who's doing the publishing for me. We're waiting on the actual, like, the first copy back from the print from the print facility, which we can then we get the review to make sure everything on the inside looks good, and then once we approve that, we'll actually run the final copies with the cover and everything. So really excited, but yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely been a journey.
Yeah, that's very exciting to be in those last final steps, kind of waiting for that final hard copy in your hand. And I think it's good to have people who aren't readers, or don't consider themselves writers, to write books, because you wrote it for those that aren't necessarily, or you don't necessarily have to be opening, 3 or 4 books a month, to read this one. I think it's an easy read for anyone across the board. So I think that's very
Well,
much
and I
appreciated.
and I appreciate that. And one of the things I set out to do was the target audience is, as I mentioned to you, early career individuals. So people either about to graduate from school or just graduated from school a few years out. And this is no secret. Our attention spans are getting shorter. It seems like every generation, and I wanted to
Right.
make sure it was something that, as I said, it was like bite sized. So it's 10 chapters. You don't have to read them all at once. It's a couple stories a chapter, and if you wanted to read, one chapter one week and one chapter the next week, you could do that, or you could do the whole thing at once. There's no right or wrong way to read it. So I wanted to make sure it was easy to read. That was a big requirement when I was putting it together.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I know you are always kind of targeting, the full potential and what we do together to those early career professionals. But I think as I was reading it, I'm like jotting down notes. I'm doing the activities myself. I think a lot of it's really timeless advice and things that even as you're 10, 15, 20 years into your career and you're feeling a little bit stuck, I think this is a really good book to pick up and skip around to some chapters and say, hey, I really haven't had time for some philanthropy earlier on, or now I do have some time. Let me read and get some advice from some people. So I think it's definitely timeless for me. I think.
Well, I appreciate that, and I agree. I mean, I think a lot of it will resonate with a lot of different people in different stages of their careers. But I wrote it, and I think many people listening or watching this will agree that when you graduate from school, you really don't know what is next. We have this structure as we grow up where you go to elementary school. I'm talking the U.S., right, school system. You go to elementary school, you go to middle school, you go to high school, and then you don't know, right? Some people go to a four-year college, some people go to a community college or a technical college, some people don't go to college. There's no right or wrong answer, but I think no matter what you do at the end of school, no matter what school you go to, you feel a little lost. I know I did. And my hope was that this would help some of those individuals feel a little bit less lost by hearing from people that have already done it.
Yeah, I think that's great. And you've how many contributors for this?
Yeah, so it's 10 chapters, it's 19 stories, and it's a total of 18 contributors, including myself. And when I started this, remember there was no COVID, so I started this. I started reaching out to people in 2019 before COVID, really not knowing how long this would take. And then COVID obviously happened. February, March of last year, we all were experiencing it. So it stalled a little bit because I couldn't ask people who were dealing with the global pandemic, like, hey, did you get my chapter done in my book? Right. It was a delicate balance. And it was interesting because I ended up with 10 chapters. Honestly, Leah probably could have done 20 based off the amount of topics that could go into a book like this, but I went with 10. People like top 10 lists, right? I do too. Yeah. So I went with 10. I tried to make it the chapters I really thought it would make sense to go in there. And then picking all the individuals I mentioned earlier, I really tried to go with like a very diverse group of people. So, and that was by design. There's people that are no longer working, that are retired, that contributed. There's people that are Gen X like myself. There's people that are millennials. There's individuals that work in nonprofits. There's individuals that work in corporate. There's individuals that are entrepreneurs. It really a wide variety of backgrounds. And again, why? The reason was, I think the different perspectives make the book special. And I think hearing from all these different individuals and just where they've been successful, and a lot of them share where they haven't been successful and what hasn't gone well, yeah. I think really helps empower people. So that was a thing that I really wanted to make sure I had that diversity of thought and experience. And I think that's what makes it powerful, is having so many different stories, and it's not just Nick.
Yeah.
No one would want to hear me go on for 10 chapters about my experiences after school, but I think hearing from all these different individuals makes it a lot more compelling.
Yeah, and I like the added touch of the bios and the contact information at the beginning. So when you're looking at these stories, you have somewhat of a background of this individual that you're reading this story about. They're real people with real life stories that they're trying to pass along and help others, and then that contact information so you can reach out to them, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, I thought that would be I like the bios because I think it helps people understand who's telling the story, and I think that's important because the stories aren't super long, as when you read them. I tried to keep them relatively short on purpose. Yeah. And so I thought having the bios was really important, just to give you a background on, like, okay, so who is this person giving me advice? I wanted to make sure you knew that. And then the reason I had the contact information, and I let the individuals pick what they wanted to put in there. It could be their website, it could be their LinkedIn, it could be their personal email. Like a funny story, I asked my mom to be in the book. My mom is not on LinkedIn. And so she gave me an email that she made just for the book from a contact information perspective. But I thought that would be cool to do the contact information, because you might really connect with that person who wrote that story and say, I want to reach out to them. I want to hear more about this, or I want to learn about this. And everyone volunteered to do that. So I thought that was great. And I think, again, it lets you connect back with the people that are part of it, which makes me really happy.
Yeah, I think it's really welcoming, especially in those early stages of your career where you're a little bit afraid of this person's so high up, like they don't want to hear from me, and they're open to it. They're like, here's my information, reach out to me. I think that's awesome. And then we talked about the activities at the end of each chapter. Where did that come from? Or I think that's another.
And I won't claim to be the first person that's put activities at the end at the end of chapters of a book. There's other books that have done this, but I just thought that I wanted to take what you learned in the stories and then apply it. So actually make it real for people. And I thought the best way to do that would be to actually put activities right in the book. And there's space in the book. You've seen it because you got the pre-read, but there's actually gonna be space in the book so you can write right in the book if you choose to, or you can always, of course, do it on your phone or on your computer. But one thing I am planning on doing is actually releasing the activities as digital PDFs to share, even if you don't buy the book, just to help people out with those, because I think there's a lot of value in them. Some of the activities I made, some of the activities were actually made by some of the people that contributed stories to the book. And then I actually had a couple activities that were contributed by other individuals. So it was really a wide variety on the types of activities. But again, I wanted you to be able to take what you learned and put it into practice as soon as possible.
Awesome. So let's just touch each chapter. I think we touched a little bit on chapter 1 with real life is hard, kind of moving from that structure of school. And I think that's a great place to start with chapter 1. Like once you graduate, you're like, oh no.
Yeah, I knew that was what I wanted to make the first chapter, and I only included like my own story in there, and it kind of just sets up the book, right? That it's okay that you don't have everything figured out. It's normal not to have everything figured out, and yeah, I think anyone that claims they did at that age is probably lying to you. But
Yeah.
it's okay to not have it figured out. And I think one of the things that I put in there that really just to me resonates with people is there's no syllabus for life. So once the structure of school ends, I think a lot of people don't know where to go next. And there's a lot. Most of the times, there's no right or wrong answer. So I wanted to just validate people's feelings that you know what, I don't know what to do next, and that's okay. So that was where I started, and that was very intentional. And I think the other thing that about that specific chapter is I kind of share, like, there's going to be things that go really well in your life, and there's going to be things that don't go well in your life. And the takeaway I try to give people is try to celebrate the things that do go well, because so often we dwell on the things that don't go well, and that gets a lot of us stuck quite often.
Yeah, I think that was a great start to the book for everyone to kind of take a deep breath, understand that they're now making their own decisions, and then moving into the next chapters where they can do some of that work, where they've kind of acknowledge that, okay, now this is starting, and I can look deep, because some of the chapters go pretty deep into some of the work you need to do on yourself. So I think that was a great starting point. And then chapter 2, I think the flow of the book was really nice, because chapter 2, so you give this real life is hard realization, and then chapter 2 talks about their support system.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the flow. That was not easy. I honestly, I have like probably 50 plus people I could thank for the book, including the contributors that went into this. But one of the contributors, I shared some of the titles of the stories with her, the chapters with her, and she's like, I don't really think that's that great of a chapter title. You should probably rewrite that, right? So I got a lot of good feedback from a lot of people to help me with the names of the chapters and the flow of it, and how I wanted to put it all together, and what made sense from the order. But yeah, the support system, we all have a support system, and what I try to go over in that chapter is the importance of having that support system, and then the activity helps you identify who should actually be in your support system, because a lot of times you may have a support system when you're in school. Your support system, just like you, has to evolve. And that's the thing I try to help people do in that chapter, is understand the importance of it, and then help you figure out who needs to be in it and why. Because when you have on this journey of life, Leah, the people that are there for you, whether they're family or friends or colleagues or mentors or sponsors or someone from a religious organization, no matter who it is, all of these people help you in different ways. And I just think it's so important to know who they are and when you need to get in touch with them to actually ask for help.
Yeah, I think that's important too. As you're making those decisions, there isn't a lack of that. You can still lean on people. You're the one still making that decision, but there's still people who have had, different experiences that you can pull into that. And to your point, that ever evolving, pulling a different kind of mentor in depending on where you're going. So I thought that was a really nice transition into, hey, it's hard, but here, list out your support system, and then people feel a little less or a little
It'll be
more
less
positive
hard.
about.
Yeah.
Yes,
It'll be less hard if you leverage those individuals. Absolutely.
exactly. And then the third chapter goes into the importance of family and friends.
Yeah, and that was, again, family and friends are obviously going to be a part of your support system, but the reason I put that in there is simply because a lot of times we get done with school and we're so focused on our career that we lose sight of our family and friends, and it's all work, 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 work. And some of the stories in the book talk about that and what what is the impact of that. So if you do prioritize work over your career over everything else, what does that mean for you? And I there's two very real stories of two different individuals that experienced that and what that meant for them. And again, I try to let people, again, it's their decision, but I want them to have all the facts going into, why is that work-life balance so important, and keeping those family and friends. So that one really hit home for me, the stories especially, just because when you and I have both talked about this, I have three little kids, and as they grow up, I always say, like, the days go slow and the years fly by, and I have a 9-year-old all of a sudden. Like, I don't know how that happened, and it goes by quick. So it's important, I think, to make sure people know that.
Yeah, and I think for me with a new, like, I have a 20-month-old, so this is all kind of new for me, and I think balancing your family and your friends early on in for me in my career was different than it is now. And I really liked the activity that you put in this chapter, and something that you can kind of revisit as that dynamic changes. So I thought that was a really important kind of touch on that work-life balance and initiating that from the get-go. And then you move into chapter 4, which is focus on building relationships.
Yeah, I think I originally had the word networking in the title, and I got the feedback that networking is, for some people, terrifying and almost a dirty word in some cases. So we removed the word networking, and I think it was actually a good point, because what I talk about in this is more than networking. It is building those. How do you connect with individuals and then turn it into a relationship? So it's not just one conversation. And I have just two amazing entrepreneurs that talk about this in the book. And again, like the whole idea here with like the diversity of thought with everyone is, when I put this together, and look, I won't lie to you, Leah, it was really hard to figure out who I wanted to have for different chapters. And because when I originally had the book, it wasn't like I had all the people in my, like, completely laid out who I wanted to do it right away. So it was one of those things that, like, I don't know, I got the stories down, and then as I was going through the people that I know that I thought could be a part of it, I had to figure out who would line up with which chapter, if that makes sense. And I had people that probably could have done multiple chapters, but I had to kind of figure it all out in my head. So I have two amazing individuals that did this chapter. That, again, they're both awesome entrepreneurs, and they come at it in very different ways at the topic. But I think it really kind of shows you that, again, with a lot of these things, there's no, like, right or wrong way to do things. And it's the same thing with building relationships. The way I build relationships may be different from the way you build relationships. So I think the different perspectives really helped on that one.
Yeah, I think it went well beyond the networking. It's about cultivating those relationships and the importance of that. So I thought that was a really really good stories for that topic. And then you move to chapter 5, which is don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah, I feel like this could be a book all in itself. So I keep telling people that this is the 10 Secrets to Success After Graduation is my first book, as part of this collection of full potential books that I want to do. And honestly, you could do a whole book on just asking for help,
Yes.
because it is something that I literally say this, like whether it's personal or professional, asking for help is a strength, not a weakness. And we talk about that in the story. And again, I have two very different ways we talk about asking for help in the story. One is from another amazing entrepreneur I know, and then the other is from a very successful therapist who actually, so a physical therapist who actually also started a nonprofit to connect people to help other people. So very different ways we talk about asking for help, but the point here again is we all don't know everything. I definitely don't know everything. I admit that on a daily basis. So I am never afraid to ask for help. And again, who do you ask for help? You ask your support system, which you identify in chapter 2. So I try to tie everything together as you kind of go through the book.
Yeah, I think that was a good tie in, especially after that networking, which seems so scary. And then you go to chapter 5, you're like, listen, it's not that scary. Like you just ask for help. And I like the stories on, you hit on it. Like it's not a weakness, which would, I think sometimes people think internally and I think for the most part it's in, you kind of touch on that pride and fear, which resonates with me because I can be a Leo in and of itself and be a little bit too like I'll figure this out myself, and sometimes it's better just to ask for help. So I thought that was and the impact of not asking for help, I thought that was really good. So that was probably one of my favorite chapters. And then you move to chapter 6. Learning is a lifelong process.
Yeah, and so I think this is so important because again, this is targeted to people that are done with school, and I think a lot of times people are like, "Oh, I'm done with school. Formal learning is over." And okay, formal learning may be over in the sense of you're not in a classroom, but the informal learning never ends. And if what no matter what job you take, whether it's corporate job, working for someone else, being an entrepreneur, working for a government entity, working for a nonprofit, you're going to have to learn what the job is. So this idea of learning is never going to end. And I learn stuff. I learn how to be a parent every day. You and I can commiserate on that, right? We're always learning how to be, what it's like to be a parent. I'm always learning as far as, I'm someone that I love LinkedIn. I think I'm never shy about that and learning there from other individuals. I learn by listening to podcasts. That's not why that's not the only reason I have a podcast, but I love learning from podcasts. You learn from books. So I think a lot of people just love, and again, access to information is now easier than ever with the internet. So if you want to go learn something, I mean, you can go to YouTube and pretty much learn anything, right? So I just think the opportunity for people to learn is just so powerful. And again, I think the the two amazing women I have that are contributors for that chapter do a great job articulating why it's so important. And again, come at it from very different ways and very different backgrounds. And I want to make sure people embrace learning their whole careers because it's going to make them more successful.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then chapter 7 is about your career journey. So setting some big goals was part of that.
Yeah, and I have two very different individuals. One is a mentee and a friend, and one is my former manager, who is just absolutely one of the most inspirational humans I've ever worked with, and for, and very different points in their career, very different as far as what they do. But the whole idea here is there's no right or wrong path for your career journey. Everyone's career journey is unique. And we talk about that every Sunday night when I interview people on my guests with guests on my podcast. No two people's career is the same, and there's so many ways that you can take it. So that's what I want to try to get across to people in that chapter is it's okay if you don't do this or do that. It's okay if you take a job and hate it. It's okay if you take a job and love it for the next 10 years. None of these things are right or wrong, right? So So that the whole idea there is, and the activity at the end is about this whole idea of a career map for yourself, but just being okay with, a little bit about the ambiguity of having a career, and it's not just going to go up like a lot of people think. It's going to go up and then down and then up and then down, and then it might stay down and then might go back up. So I love how they articulate their journeys and what that means and how other people can learn from them.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Chapter 8 was risk taking in your 20s.
Yeah. So I am someone who took a risk in my 20s. I quit my corporate job to work for myself in 2006. So this is something that I feel like I've done. So that's why I wanted to have it in here, because if you're going to take a risk, when for many of us, we didn't have, like, I didn't have kids. I was not married when I was in my 20s. So that was the time for me to do it, which is why I did it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, two very different stories. One similar to me, had a corporate job, quit her corporate job to go start a business, and the other talks about the risk of moving across the country for a new job, which I think is obviously a very terrifying thing for a lot of people. So two very different stories, but again, I think the perspective they both give you on why it's a good idea to take a risk in your 20s, I think will resonate with many people that read it.
Yeah, I think that perspective, like it's one topic of risking things, but the stories are just so different. And the ones, kind of talking about how when you're younger, betting on yourself. And I think it was that was a really inspirational chapter for me in understanding, like, take that, say yes rather than no. And then later on in your, 40s or 50s, you're like, oh man, I really wish I would have done that kind of a thing. So I thought that was a really good chapter to hit on. And then chapter 9 was your personal brand.
Yeah, and I think personal brand, Leah, is something that you hear a lot about. And if you go on LinkedIn, there's personal branding experts um, all over, right? That'll tell you how to do your personal brand and charge you how to do your personal brand. I have two really inspirational women who share their stories about personal brand. One is truly a personal branding expert. That is her business. The other is a successful entrepreneur in the wine industry. So they talk about personal brands. One is the personal branding expert, and the other is someone who's actually done it, which I think is pretty cool. So again, very, very unique perspectives. But I just think this is so important, especially with the internet. When I went to college, Mark Zuckerberg was building Facebook in Harvard in his dorm
Right.
room, so I didn't have Facebook. I think owning your personal brand is harder now than ever before, because there's so many ways for you to share your personal brand, but at the same time also possibly damage your personal brand. So it's just, again, with Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great responsibility. That's your personal brand. So that's why I have it in there. And the activity is awesome because it actually helps you get started in creating your own personal brand.
Yeah, I think they give a lot of good tips there. And then the activity to kind of work through that, because that can be daunting to create your own personal
Absolutely.
brand. So I thought that was a really, like, thorough chapter. And then that activity just helps kind of bite size piece that out. And then the last chapter, which I think is a fantastic way to end, is the power of philanthropy.
Yeah, and I mentioned earlier my mom's one of the contributors to that chapter, but it's my mom, and this is an amazing individual. I'm going to shout out everyone at the end with of all the contributors. This amazing individual, IT executive, who's just he's so focused on philanthropy outside of work. It's amazing, and I put that in there, and it's not 10th because it's the least important, right? And there's no right, most important or least important as far as the order here. But I put that in there because a lot of individuals don't think when they're done with school that they can really give back from a philanthropic perspective, because a lot of people don't have the money to give back in that way right out of school. But I think this chapter does a great job of explaining how you don't have to just give money. You can give your time or your talents as well. So
Mm-hmm.
and I think for me, I don't think I did enough of philanthropic work in my 20s when I was done with school. So I really have ramped that up in my 30s, and I wanted to make sure that was a big part of the of this story.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to end it. I think how they approached it with those, use your talents, use your skills, and build on those in those, philanthropic or volunteer experiences. I think I think that absolutely needs to be a chapter in this book. And that's the 10 chapters. It's a lot of content, but it's so bite-sized and it's easy to read and get, feel through these people's stories and take the activities on. So I am a huge fan of this book. I can't wait to get a hard copy of it.
And I appreciate that, that, and they were meant to be bite sized. And I actually even say in the book, you can read this cover to cover if you want. You can read this out of order. You can read one chapter now, one chapter later. It doesn't have to be read in order, and that was all again on purpose. I do want to shout out to everyone, all the contributors. So first, I want to just thank my wife, Melanie Wagner, who put up with me doing this over the past almost 2 years. So I want to thank her. And I want to thank Megan Hayden, who owns Riverbend Bookshop, for getting it published for me. Kate Kormashoff did the cover for me and helped with the artistic flair of the book. So I want to thank Kate for that. And then my editor asked to remain anonymous, but she is amazing. And I will tell you that was probably the scariest part going into this was, like, I found Megan to publish it, and I, once she agreed to that, I was like, okay, awesome, to check that box. But now, who am I going to have edit this? And luckily, one of my contributors used this editor for her book, so I was able to get in touch with her, and it was just, we clicked right away, and she's just amazing. So really, really happy to have found her. But so I want to just hit on a couple of the contributors of the book. So Gary Burnham is in chapter 2 with your support system, Matt Williams and Eric Sherman, who, fun fact, I grew up with them, so I went to middle school and high school with them. They're in chapter 3, the importance of family and friends. The focus on building relationships. I mentioned 2 amazing entrepreneurs, so John Jaramillo and David Salinas, 2 unbelievable individuals that I have a privilege of knowing. That's chapter 4. The don't be afraid to ask for help. And again, it was hard for me to figure out where to put everyone, because people could do different chapters, but Shannon Malcolm Daniels and Michelle Puzo did Don't Be Afraid to Ask for Help. 2 amazing women. And again, I think they did a great job like articulating it, why it's so important. One of my mentees and friends, Nicole Baccaro, and a woman who I actually, fun fact, met through LinkedIn, Holly O'Driscoll, are my contributors for learning is a lifelong process. And it's funny because I have contributors in here. I have my mom, who obviously I've known the longest. I have friends I grew up with, and then I have individuals that literally met on LinkedIn through someone connected me, or I connected with them, and we've become friends, right? So it's just a very diverse group of people. I mentioned your career journey. So Jonas Boley, who is a mentee of mine, and I would now consider a friend. All my mentees end up being friends. I end up being mentors to them for years, and then they teach me stuff. So I really just say they end up being friends. Eric Consolazio, who again, probably the most inspirational manager I've ever had, was my former manager. He's the other contributor in your career journey. Risk taking in your 20s. So one of the individuals, Luis Valdez Jimenez, was on my podcast. Great guy, who used to work with my brother. So that's Luis, and then Christine Schindler, who is an amazing woman entrepreneur doing unbelievable things. She's based in New York, so thank you, Christine. And the personal brand I mentioned, so 2 awesome women, that one. So Christina Musto is the successful entrepreneur in the wine industry. She's the only person I know that has a master's in wine, right? Which is really interesting, which I didn't even know that was a thing. And then Stacy Cohen is the personal branding expert. She actually has a firm that focuses on a lot of things, including personal branding. She has her own book coming out later this year, so she was an awesome contributor. And then we wrap it up with my mom, Stephanie Wagner, for the Power of Philanthropy. And then Mike Williams, who I mentioned is an unbelievable IT executive that I used to work with. And philanthropy is just in this man's DNA. And it's a privilege to know him. And again, to have him close, I think, to have him close the book with his story on how you can give away what he calls your talents, your treasures, or your time, I think is just such a fantastic way to close. And then I had a couple other people that helped. Jessica Pear was one of the individuals who provided me with one of the activities. And then I can't tell you how many other people I bounced ideas off of, or asked to read it, or asked for feedback. It was really I have an amazing support system that helped me get this book completed.
That's awesome. That is, I'm so happy to when I get it in actual copy and throw it on my bookshelf and reference for years to come. So where can people pre-order it today?
Yeah, so I mentioned I was working with Megan Hayden, who owns Riverbend Bookshop in Glastonbury, Connecticut. A lot of people asked me, like, why didn't you go through Amazon and self-publish? And I wanted to support Megan, who was again one of my old managers. She quit her corporate job to start her own bookstore. I want to support her, and she's getting into publishing, so I'm her first book that she's publishing, which is super cool.
Yeah.
So the easiest way to find out more and pre-order is just go to my website. So it's nickwagnersr.com/book, and that you'll learn more about the book there, and it has the link to Megan's website to pre-order the book. So again, we're taking the pre-orders now with the hope of these shipping by the end of April. And again, the timing, I think this is a great book for people graduating from school, whether again it's high school or college or community college, whatever it is. So I wanted to have it out by the end of April. So if you're graduating in May or June, it would be a good gift for individuals.
A great gift for that May graduation. And I did pre-order mine. It was super easy, just a couple of clicks. So
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. So no issues there on the pre-order online. So we covered it. Your book is coming out. Everybody can pre-order it. Any last comments before we end today?
No, I just want to thank everyone for their support. I was actually at Riverbend picking up some books for my kids because I try to buy my books for Megan, and they said they've had quite a few pre-orders. So thank you to everyone who pre-ordered and is supporting me. And again, all the proceeds from the book are going to my family's nonprofit. So that's how I'm trying to give back, and I'm just really happy to be able to help individuals. And I just want to say thank you again to all the contributors, because I think the book is just, I think it's so powerful because of that diversity of experiences and the people's background that wrote all the stories. And look, it means a lot that I could reach out to 17 other people and have them share a personal story of, from their career to put in the book. So it's I feel very, very blessed that I have that many people that wanted to help me. I'm so excited to actually, like to your point, get it in my hands. Every pre-order, Megan told me I have to go down to her store and sign, and then she ships them out. So yeah, that she said that's something she does with all of her pre-orders.
Yes.
She makes the authors sign them, so I get to sign it. So I gotta have to work on my signature for that. But no, I'm super excited. So Leah, thanks for making time and interviewing me rather than me doing the interviewing on the podcast. Just a couple quick things. If you like the podcast, click subscribe on YouTube or follow me on LinkedIn. You can also follow The Full Potential on Instagram and Facebook. And I think the other thing that, just a quick programming note, here in the U.S., of course, next Sunday is Easter, just like the rest of the world. So I'm not going to be doing a show next Sunday because it is Easter. So I'm going to be taking off next week, but we'll be back in April with another guest.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. I appreciate you letting me do this, and look forward to the book.
I had a lot of fun. Thank you, Leah.
All right. Bye.
Happy Sunday.